Hello student, I am Professor Smita Jha and I am here to discuss how to form research question. The first part I have already narrated, and this is the second part because I think that these are the topics which should be explained and in detail, elaborated well. So let us see what we can discuss more, because forming the question is very important, because the entire research is an argument, as I said earlier, and it is a kind of argument, counter argument that comes up with the help of significant questions. So let us discuss this particular part. So textbooks and successful researchers will tell you that the selection and formulation of good research questions are important, if not the most important parts of research. Unfortunately, relatively little guidance is available about the genesis of good questions, either from books or mentors. Brilliant research questions do not appear spontaneously, and the ability to pose good question is not an innate skills. However, the skill can be cultivated and used successfully in conjunction with guidance from colleagues and mentors. A good research question defines your study and helps you seek an answer to your research. Moreover, a clear research question guides the research paper or thesis to define exactly what you want to find out, giving your work its objective. Learning to write a research question is the beginning to any thesis, dissertation, or research paper. Furthermore, the question addresses issues or problems which is answered through analysis and interpretation of data. What is a research question? That we need to understand, and earlier also I explained this particular aspect. Well, umbrella questions that address your topic include keywords and phrases to help guide your research and approach to database and library searches. Questions you don't know the answer to. You are researching to gain new knowledge, and not too narrow and not too broad. Focused, clear, appropriately complex. Now, a research question pinpoints exactly what you want to find out in your work. A good research question is essential to guide your research paper, dissertation, or thesis. All research questions should be focused on a single problem or issue, researchable using primary or secondary sources, feasible to answer within the time frame and practical constraints, specific enough to answer thoroughly, complex enough to develop the answer over the space of a paper or thesis. Why are they important? Means the questions, framing of question. The single most important component of a study is the research question. It is the keystone of the entire exercise. Identifies your unique contribution to the field, influence your literature review, influence how you will collect data, the kinds of questions you will ask, helps you think about how others will argue against it. Importance of sub-questions. Provide further support for your research question. Sub-questions are narrower questions that answer research questions. Good sub-questions should be open question. This means that they cannot be answered with a simple yes or no answer. Usually, this means starting with who, what, when, where, why, or how. Incorporate terms and concepts that you learned during your background research. Offer a roadmap to break up your PhD into manageable pieces. Make the PhD process less daunting. So, every good research project has a well-defined topic. Selecting and developing a topic is an ongoing process by which you define and refine your ideas. You can then focus your research strategies to find relevant and appropriate information Before you begin the research process, be sure that you understand the assignment, the purpose, and the requirements. Plan for sufficient research, thinking, and writing time for the project. Then define, revise, and refine your work. Select a topic. Start with an idea in which you are interested. What do you want to know about? Talk with your class instructor about an idea. Class instructor or your mentor or your supervisor. Ask a librarian for help for books and journals and database. Do some background reading in a general or a specialized encyclopedia or other reference to gain a better understanding of your topic. Do some preliminary research to see what is available. Analyze your topic. What kind of information do you need? Take the help of scholarly, primary, or secondary sources. Books, articles, internet, interviews, visual sources, subject or discipline specific viewpoint, related or multi-perspective. Evaluate your information and resources. Is it authoritative? Is it accurate? Is it current? Is it appropriate for your assignment or your research? Revise and refine. Think about the information you have found. Which do you need to revise? Topic, question, search terms and strategies, sources. Does the information help to answer the research question? Continue to work with the information until you have achieved satisfactory results. Formulate your own ideas and opinions. Think critically and creatively about your information and ideas. Draw conclusions and make connections based on your research. Your research question should align with your research gap and the problem statement. Well, in some example, the author is talking about the practical challenges of using biomass as a renewable source of electricity. Well, I am talking as an example because you need to cut down a lot of trees for this. So, when readers are expecting a research question along the lines of finding better and more efficient ways to produce biomass, the author mentions that the objective of his work is to investigate the competency requirements of managers working in the biomass industry. So, good research is represented by the acronym FINERMAPS. FINERMAPS. F means feasible, I interesting, N novel, E ethical, R relevant, M manageable, A appropriate, P potential value and publishability, S systematic. What do we mean by feasible? Feasibility means that it is within the ability of the investigator to carry out. It should be backed by an appropriate number of subjects and methodology, as well as time and funds to reach the conclusions. Relate the concepts of the RQ to the observations, phenomena, indicators, or variables that one can access. Interesting. This is essential that one has a real grounded interest in one's RQ and one can explore this and back it up with academic and intellectual debate. This interest will motivate one to keep going with RQ, that is research question. Novel. The question should not simply copy questions investigated by other workers, but should have a scope to be investigated. It may aim at confirming or refuting the already established findings, establish new facts, or find new aspects of the established facts. It should show imagination of the researchers. Ethical, this is the foremost requirement of any research question and is mandatory to get clearance from appropriate authorities before stating research on the question. Research questions should be such that it minimizes the risk of harm to the participants in the research, protect the privacy and maintain their confidentiality, and provide the participants a right to withdraw from research. It should also guide in avoiding deceptive practices in research. Relevant academic and intellectual interest to people in the field you have chosen to study. The question preferable should arise from issues raised in the current situation, literature, or in practice. It should establish a clear purpose for the research in relation to the chosen field. Manageable. It has the similar essence as of feasibility, but mainly means that the following research can be managed by the researcher. Appropriate. Research questions should be appropriate logically and scientifically for the community and institution. Systematic. Research is structured with a specified steps to be taken in a specified sequence in accordance with the well-defined set of rules, though it does not rule out creative thinking. Now, how to develop meaningful research question? Begin by identifying a broader subject of interest that lends itself to investigate. Do preliminary research on the general topic to find out what research has already been done and what literature already exists. What do you still need to know? What are the implied questions? Narrow the scope and focus of research. One question has been framed, one should evaluate it. Is research question clear, focused, complex, or one that is of interest to the researcher and potentially useful to others? Is the research question researchable, measurable, and will the process produce data that can be supported or contradicted? Is the RQ too, means research question, too broad or too narrow? Now, state the question while you are writing the research question. State the question in your own word. Write down the questions as completely as possible, no short form. Divide your question into concepts, narrow to 2 or 3 concepts. Specify the population to be studied. Refer to the exposure or intervention to be investigated, if any. Reflect the outcome of interest. Now, research question versus research aims. At this point, you might be asking yourself, how is a research question different from a research aim? Within any given study, the research aim and research question are tightly intertwined, but they are separate things. A research aim is typically broader in nature and outlines what you hope to achieve with your research. It doesn't ask a specific question, but rather gives a summary of what you intend to explore. The research question, on the other hand, is much more focused. It is the specific query you are setting out to answer. It narrows down the research aim into a detailed, researchable question that will guide your studies, methods, and analysis. Now, what is research aim? What should be? To explore the effects of climate change on marine life in India or anywhere in the world. This is the aim when you are writing. Suppose this is the aim. Suppose climate changing. What is the effect of climate changing on, in India or the world? And the question, how does ocean acidification caused by climate change affect the reproduction rates of coral reefs? As you can see, the research aim gives you a general focus, while the research question details exactly what you want to find out. So, one is the umbrella while it is a focused. How many research questions should I have? This is a frequently asked question. The number can vary, but it is good to start with one main research question that directly aligns with your research aim. If necessary, you can add more, 2, 3, 5. Don't write more than 6. Or you can develop additional sub-questions to help your answer the main one. This is also a frequently asked question. What should I avoid when writing a research question? Avoid using jargon, making it too complex, or framing it as yes or no question. Your research question should invite exploration and analysis. Further, can a research question be a statement? Typically, a research question is phrased as a question, not a statement. A question clearly indicates what you are setting out to discover. Can a research question be too broad or too narrow? Yes. A question that is too broad makes your research unfocused, while a question that is too narrow limits the scope of your study. Here is an example of research question that is too broad. Why is mental health important? Conversely, here is an example of a research question that is likely too narrow. What is the impact of sleep deprivation on the exam scores of 19-year-old males in London studying maths at the Open University? Further, the frequently asked question, can I change my research question during the research process? Yes, you can, but do so with caution. Changing your research question means you will likely have to adjust your literature review and methodology, which is naturally quite time consuming. That said, it is not uncommon for the research question to shift or evolve somewhat after undertaking a comprehensive literature review. Frequently asked question again, that is a research question similar to hypothesis? Not quite. A hypothesis is a testable statement that predicts an outcome, while a research question is a query that you are trying to, means as a researcher trying to answer through your study. Naturally, there can be linkages between a study's research question and hypothesis, but they serve different functions. Further frequently asked question, how are research question and research objectives related? The research question is a focused and a specific query that your study aims to answer. It is the central issue you are investigating. The research objective, on the other hand, outlines the steps you will take to answer your research question. Research objectives are often more action-oriented and can be broken down into a smaller task that guide your research process. In a sense, they are something of a roadmap that helps you to answer your research question. Well, these are some points regarding research question. What about the topic interest you? What is being affected? Why? Why is this topic important to you? Why is it important to other people? Who? Who is involved in the situation? Who is affected? Where? What part of the world will you focus on? When? What time period do you want to focus on? How? How is this topic affecting people and how is it happening? Once you have narrowed your research question, you should then test your research question to determine if it is narrow enough by beginning to research your specific topic. When you search for the information, you are getting many results that don't address your specific question, then you should first double check that you are searching using the correct keywords and Boolean operators. If Boolean operator means review keywords. If you are searching using the correct methods and are still getting too many results, then you will need to narrow your research question even more. Many qualitative researchers see a question as a beginning point for their research. Once a satisfactory question is in place, a study can begin. A research question does fulfill this function, but I propose here that much more is involved in creating and using research question in qualitative studies. The reflective and interrogative processes required for developing research questions can give shape and direction to a study in ways that are often underestimated. Good questions do not necessarily produce good research, but poorly conceived or constructed questions will likely create problems that affect all subsequent stages of a study. Ultimately, the quality of the initial questions impact whether or not a study is approved by a dissertation committee, published or funded. This article addresses both the development of initial research questions and how the processes of generating and refining questions are critical to the shaping all phases of a qualitative study, the inquiry process. The idea of qualitative inquiry as a reflective process underscores the strength of a qualitative approach. At the heart of this approach are methods for representing what Gers called the microscopic details of the social and cultural aspects of individuals' lives. He describes the central task of the ethnographer in his well-known discussion on the myriad interpretation of a human wink. He noted that it is not enough to describe a wink and label it as a behavior. Rather, the thing to ask about human behavior is what their import is. The researcher's credibility rests, according to Gers, on the specific of a place and the people who inhabit that place at a given moment, an issue addressed by Maxwell, Patton and others. Thus, the researcher's worth is characterized by the degree to which he is able to clarify what goes on in such places to reduce the puzzlement. What manner of men are these? Qualitative inquiries involve asking the kinds of questions that focus on why and how of human interaction. Qualitative research questions that need to articulate what a researcher wants to know about the intention and perspective of those involved in social interaction. Strauss noted that the tradition from which qualitative inquiry sprang placed social interaction and social processes at the center of this approach. He highlighted the purpose for qualitative inquiry, which from its inception emphasized the necessity for grasping the actors' viewpoints for understanding interaction, process and social change. Good qualitative questions are usually developed or refined in all stages of a reflexive and interactive inquiry journey. It is noted that reflecting on and reformulating the research questions are central points of reference for assessing the appropriateness of the decisions you take at several points. To extend the journey metaphor, it is helpful to think of research questions as navigational tools that can help a researcher map possible directions, but also to inquire about the unexpected. Good questions can grow out of initial curiosity or ideas for a qualitative study, but at the early stages, most questions are rough draft. Genesics suggest beginning with a self-question, what do I want to know in this study? Even those using grounded theory have some broad questions after entering a potential research site. Camus suggests that broad questions such as what is going on here, what are the basic social processes, and what are the basic social psychological processes can serve to help a researcher find some initial focus. Maxwell called these early questions provisional but noted that even these early interactions are already determining decisions about theory and method. These initial questions can be conceptualized as generative. They may invite a series of more specific questions that help to create the focus needed to move forward with data collection. Most qualitative researchers need a specific question for a proposition. Creating one or two broad questions can be a fertile starting point for thinking through the specifics of what the study is about and what data will need to be collected. Maxwell observed that precisely framed research question can point you to specific areas of theory that you can use as modules in developing an understanding of what is going on and suggest ways to do the study. For example, a researcher in the field of social welfare might want to know if child welfare workers suffer from secondary post-traumatic stress as a result of their work with neglected or abused children. An initial question might be simply framed: do child welfare workers suffer from secondary post-traumatic stress? Creating an overarching question to guide the inquiry process. Developing an overarching question, as Genesik did, has advantages for the researcher. A broad framed question can serve as a basis for the initial and emerging sub-question. A single overarching question allows a researcher to capture the basic goals of their study in one major question. A clearly stated overarching question can give direction for the study design and collection of data and offer the potential for developing new, more specific question during data collection and analysis. Theory and question, a dialogic process. Theory is inextricably linked to research question, whether the theory is shaping them initially or suggesting new questions as the study unfolds. An overarching question for many qualitative studies will point toward one or more of theoretical constructs that frame the study. As Maxwell explained, research questions need to account for one's tentative theories about phenomena. Those tentative theories and the questions that result from them may very well change to accommodate data collection or preliminary findings. Often when doctoral students write proposal, they are drawn to grand theories as beginning point. For example, a researcher may be drawn to social justice issues and therefore choose a critical theory framework with write large in the initial stages. As the design develops, the researcher may decide to focus on questions about a particular aspect of social context, such as social interactions. At this point, the theory might be narrowed to discourse analysis, and research questions about discourse and the positioning of individuals in a discourse would follow. Theoretical framing evolves and changes during most studies and may also inspire additional questions as a researcher collected data. Karpik, for example, had begun her study of middle-aged social workers with 3 questions. What happened to these professionals in their work, their personal relationship, and their sense of self during the midlife transition? How do they manage and the changes and transitions during this period? Finally, for those for whom this period has ushered in major changes, what events triggered them? After she was immersed in collecting her data, she found chaos theory revealed other dimensions of the participants' life changes that she had not originally considered. Through the lens of this theory, I could see the possibilities for human evolution that may follow from disorder, turbulence, chaos, crisis. Turn to chaos theory helped generated new questions on how middle-aged people handle life situation beyond their control. There are many practical consideration to think about when writing questions. So, some questions are simply not answerable given the researcher's time framework and resources. When writing questions, a novice researcher may not take into account the cost of travel, copying, transcription and all the time and material required. When writing a qualitative research question, it is usually important not to phrase it so that it leads or contains a presupposition about participants or event. In qualitative qualitative research in particular, the research is trying to discover meaning throughout the inquiry process. Critical theorists often begin by assuming unequal power relationship exists, and those assumptions may shape questions. In participatory action research, initial questions may also seem to lead as they tend to focus on a local set of circumstances, yet these kinds of research can also work towards a process that opens an inquiry rather than closing it prematurely. Thus, good qualitative question can be significant tools that shape a study design and analysis. Although initial questions often emerge from a researcher's passions and interest in particular topics, ultimately the goal is to refine and possibly expand the inquiry through reflexive, iterative and dialogic processes that are central to the theoretical and ethical positions taken up by the researcher. And during the inquiry process, a researcher needs to see questions as tools for discovery as well as tools for clarity. With this, I wrap up the discussion. Let us meet in another discussion related to research methodology to know some more aspect. Till then, thank you.